My name is Andrea Ventola. I'm a PhD student here at the University of Michigan, and today we'll be running the Atterberg limit tests. There's two separate tests involved. You have the liquid limit test, also known as the Casa Grande test, and then the plastic limit test. We'll be running both of them today. I'll be referencing the lab manual throughout both tests, and I encourage you to do the same. So the first thing you want to make sure is you're wearing safety glasses and taking all necessary precautions. I'll next begin by explaining the equipment that we'll be using for both tests. One specifically for the liquid limit test, we have the Casa Grande device, which is simply a brass bowl, which when you rotate the crank, the bowl moves up to a maximum height, and then it drops back down to the base. You have a multifunctional grooving tool, you have 4 moisture containers, and then moving on to the plastic limit equipment, you have a frosted glass plate, you have a comparison rod, you have a larger moisture can with a lid. And for both tests, we'll be using a spatula, some water, and then we'll be using the same clay mixture for both two tests. We also have a scale to take measurements for, again, both plastic and limit tests. We'll first begin with the liquid limit test. And the first step in that test involves looking at the Casa Grande device to make sure it's set up correctly. More specifically, we want to make sure that that maximum drop height I mentioned earlier is set to 1 centimeter. The way to test that is to use the multifunctional grooving tool, and we can use the back end of it, which has a thickness of 1 centimeter. And if you can raise the brass bowl of the Casa Grande device to its maximum height, and you can pass this back end of the grooving tool cleanly underneath the bowl without any large gaps, then you know you're at the correct height, in which case we are here. The next step is to add water to your dry clay. You want to make sure you add the water sparingly and make sure that the existing water in the bowl is fully incorporated with the clay before adding additional water. You want to add it sparingly, as I said, because the Casa Grande test is somewhat trial and error when it comes to water contents. So it's better and more convenient to start slightly drier and then add additional water along the way. You also want to make sure that the sides of the bowl are scraped so that you fully incorporate any dry clay particles into your mixture. And once you've found that your mixture is homogeneous and there's no dry patches, you can begin testing with the Casa Grande device. You only want to place soil in the lower half of the bowl. And you can take a small portion of your clay and you want to smear it and spread it as evenly and cleanly as you can in the bottom half. If you find that you've placed too much clay, you can simply scrape some off and then clean up your soil pat. You want to remove any overhanging clay and fill in any holes. The next thing you want to do is check the thickness of your soil pat. And to do that, we'll be using our grooving tool. You'll simply be placing the grooving tool in the thickest portion of the soil pat and seeing where the soil thickness falls in relation to the shoulders of the tool. So my soil is currently a little too thick. It's touched the shoulders of the tool, so I'm going to scrape off a bit of the clay. I will clean up the soil pat a bit and then repeat the process. Now it's the correct thickness and we're ready to make a groove in our soil pat. So you want to start up at the top of the bowl and you want to follow the contour of the bowl as you make your groove. And you want to stay in the center and do one clean movement. So I'm making the groove and I followed the contour to make one clean center groove in your soil pat. And now you're ready to start testing. Another feature of the grooving tool is you can use the diameter of the back part of the groove to see the required contact length as you start testing. So as you start cranking, you want to count the number of blows of your test. And if you have reached the contact length, again referencing the tool, which I'm indicating here, you can record the number of blows that it took to reach that contact length. And if that falls in the appropriate range, you can gather a portion of the soil pat in that contact area. You can place it in a moisture cup. After weighing all of your specimens, you're going to place them all in the oven, and after 24 hours, take them out and record the dry weight. Now that we've finished the liquid limit test, we're going to move on to the plastic limit. We can use the same clay as before, and the glass plate that we saw at the beginning of the video, just want to make a point that we want to use the frosted side of the glass during this test. And the reason for that is as we're rolling out our clay, if we find the clay is a little bit too wet, rolling it on this frosted glass helps dry it out a bit. Another thing to note is this comparison rod, and it's used to give an indication for the size, the diameter of rods that we want to look for as we're rolling out, so it's good just to keep it nearby. We also want to have our tin nearby, so as soon as we have rods or pieces of rods that pass the test, we can set them in this container, keep the lid on it while we're running tests so we don't have any moisture evaporation. And we want to collect 20 grams of material during this test. So let's get started. Similar to the liquid limit, the plastic limit can be a little bit trial and error. So we'll see what we get. So you want to first just grab a small piece of your clay, roll it in your hands, get it to sort of an ellipse shape. And then you can start rolling on the glass, keeping even pressure as you're rolling. You can use your fingers. If you find that your clay is too wet, you can move to drier parts of the plate, which is what I'm doing now. You can also break off pieces of your rods if they get too long. So this rod has gotten pretty close to the diameter of the comparison rod, but it's still too moist because we don't see any cracking. So we're going to start rolling again. So this piece of the rod is still a little bit too wet, so we're going to break that off. And the portions that have started to crack at the diameter of the comparison rod are what we're looking for. So we're going to place that in our container, keep the lid on again to prevent moisture, and we can continue with the other pieces. So this piece is also looking good, so I'll put it in there. And if you find as you're working with your clay that it's too wet and you kind of want to accelerate the process, you can spread a bit of it on a dry piece of the glass to help sort of speed it up as you're rolling out other pieces. If you find it's too dry as you're working with it, you can either add some more water in the bowl or get your hands a little bit wet as you're rolling. But again, you don't want to work with pieces for very long. So if after a couple of rolls it's still not good, just throw it out and get a new piece. So this piece also looks good. And so again, put it in the container. If I can get it open. And you want to repeat the process until you have your 20 grams, at which case you want to then finish your test. You can take this weight and then pop this in the oven. And that concludes the Atterberg limit tests. Thanks.